Articulate like a leader. Speak clearly, think quickly, lead confidently. Written and published by Rising Audiobook. Introduction. Think about the last person who truly impressed you. Chances are, it wasn't because they used complicated words or spoke the loudest. It was because they made every sentence feel clear, confident, and meaningful. They spoke with a calm certainty that naturally earned attention, trust, and respect. Now consider this. Every day, opportunities are won and lost through conversation. A job interview, a business meeting, a presentation, a negotiation, even a casual discussion with someone who could change your future. In each of these moments, your ability to express your thoughts clearly often matters more than how much you know. Many people spend years improving their technical skills, yet neglect the one ability that amplifies every other skill they possess, the ability to communicate with clarity and confidence. They believe great communicators are simply born that way. They aren't. Behind every powerful speaker is a collection of habits, principles, and deliberate practice that anyone can learn. This audiobook is not about sounding smarter than everyone else. It's about becoming so clear in your thinking that your words naturally become more powerful. You'll learn how to organize your thoughts, speak with confidence under pressure, replace hesitation with certainty, influence without manipulation, and communicate like someone people instinctively trust and follow. By the end of this journey, you won't just speak better. You'll think better, connect better, lead better, and carry yourself with a quiet confidence that opens doors long before you ever ask for the opportunity. Because leadership doesn't begin with a title. It begins the moment your words inspire others to listen. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why great leaders speak differently. Have you ever noticed that the most respected person in a room isn't always the smartest or the most experienced? Often it's the person who communicates with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Their words are easy to follow. Their ideas are organized. They don't speak to impress. They speak to connect. And because of that, people naturally trust them. Many people believe leadership begins with a title, a promotion, or years of experience. In reality, leadership often begins the moment people choose to listen to you. Before anyone can follow your vision, they must first understand it. That's why communication is not just another leadership skill. It is the foundation of leadership itself. Think about the leaders you admire most. Whether they lead a company, a classroom, a community, or a family, they all share one powerful trait. They know how to express their thoughts in a way that inspires confidence. They don't overwhelm people with complicated language or endless explanations. Instead, they make difficult ideas simple, important messages memorable, and conversations meaningful. This is where many talented people struggle. They assume that knowledge alone is enough. They spend years learning technical skills, earning degrees, and gaining experience, yet fail to communicate what they know effectively. As a result, their ideas remain unheard, their contributions go unnoticed, and opportunities pass them by. Imagine two employees presenting the same proposal during a meeting. Both have done equal research and reached similar conclusions. The first rushes through the presentation, jumps between ideas, and fills every pause with nervous words like, you know, and I guess. The second speaks calmly, organizes the key points logically, pauses when necessary, and explains the proposal in simple language. Even if both proposals are equally good, which presenter is more likely to earn trust? Most people would choose the second. The difference isn't intelligence, it's communication. Great leaders understand that people rarely remember every detail of a conversation. Instead, they remember how the speaker made them feel. Did they feel confused or informed? Overwhelmed or inspired? Uncertain or confident? Clear communication creates emotional certainty, and certainty builds trust. Trust is the currency of leadership. Without trust, even brilliant ideas struggle to gain support. With trust, people become willing to listen, collaborate, and take action. Every clear sentence you speak is a small investment in that trust. Another quality that separates articulate leaders is intentionality. They don't speak simply because it's their turn. They speak because they have something meaningful to contribute. Before they begin talking, they often ask themselves simple questions. What is the purpose of this conversation? What do I want people to understand? What action should follow? These questions keep their communication focused instead of scattered. This doesn't mean great leaders always have perfect answers. In fact, one of the most powerful communication habits is the willingness to admit uncertainty. Confident leaders are comfortable saying, "I don't know yet, but I'll find out." Far from weakening their credibility, honesty strengthens it. People respect authenticity more than false certainty. Another misconception is that articulate leaders are naturally outgoing. While some are extroverts, many exceptional communicators are quiet by nature. Their strength doesn't come from speaking the most. It comes from speaking with intention. They listen carefully before responding. They choose words thoughtfully. They understand that silence, when used wisely, can be just as powerful as speech. This is an important lesson. Communication is not a competition to dominate every conversation. It is the ability to create understanding. Sometimes the strongest communicator is the one who asks thoughtful questions, listens without interrupting, and responds with clarity instead of emotion. Articulate leaders also understand that confidence is communicated through more than words. Their posture is relaxed, their eye contact is steady, and their pace is controlled. They don't rush because they aren't trying to prove themselves. They trust that their message deserves to be heard. That calm presence encourages others to slow down and pay attention. The encouraging news is that none of these qualities are reserved for a gifted few. They are skills, not talents. Clear thinking can be practiced. Better vocabulary can be developed. Confidence can be built through repetition. Listening can become a habit. Every conversation is another opportunity to improve. Throughout this audiobook, you'll discover practical strategies to strengthen each of these skills. You'll learn how to organize your thoughts before speaking, explain ideas with clarity, respond confidently under pressure, and communicate in a way that earns respect rather than demands it. Remember this simple truth. People cannot appreciate the value of your ideas if they cannot understand them. Your knowledge becomes influential only when it is communicated effectively. Leadership does not begin the day you receive authority. It begins the day your words give people confidence, direction, and hope. When you learn to communicate with clarity and purpose, you don't simply become a better speaker. You become someone others are willing to trust, follow, and remember. That journey starts with every conversation you have from this moment forward. Chapter 2. Think before you speak. Have you ever finished speaking and immediately thought, "That didn't come out the way I wanted"? Perhaps you forgot an important point, wandered off topic, or realized later that there was a much better way to express your idea. This happens to everyone. The problem usually isn't a lack of knowledge, it is a lack of organized thinking. Great communicators don't just speak well, they think well first. One of the biggest differences between average speakers and exceptional leaders is that leaders create clarity in their minds before they try to create clarity in someone else's. They understand that confused thinking always leads to confused communication. If your thoughts are scattered, your words will be scattered too. Many people feel pressured to answer immediately. They believe a quick response makes them appear intelligent or confident. In reality, rushing often produces the opposite effect. When your mind races, your sentences become longer, your ideas become tangled, and you begin filling the silence with words that add little value. The most articulate people are comfortable with a brief pause. That pause may last only a second or two, but it gives the brain enough time to organize thoughts into a clear message. Instead of reacting emotionally, they respond intentionally. Far from making them appear uncertain, this habit makes them sound thoughtful and composed. A simple way to improve your thinking before speaking is to ask yourself 3 questions. What is my main message? Why does it matter to the listener? What action or understanding do I want them to leave with? These questions force your mind to focus on what is essential instead of trying to say everything at once. Another powerful habit is learning to simplify your thoughts before expressing them. Many people believe that sounding intelligent means including every detail they know. The opposite is often true. Great leaders remove unnecessary information until only the most important ideas remain. Imagine explaining a new project to your team. You could spend 15 minutes describing every background detail, every challenge, and every possibility. Or you could begin with a simple statement. Our goal is to improve customer response time by 20% over the next 3 months. Immediately, everyone understands the objective. Once people understand the destination, the details become much easier to follow. Simple thinking produces simple communication. Mental clutter is another obstacle to articulate speaking. Our minds are constantly filled with worries, assumptions, distractions, and internal conversations. Sometimes we're thinking about what others might think of us, instead of focusing on what we're trying to say. This creates hesitation and uncertainty. To communicate effectively, you must learn to quiet that mental noise. Focus on serving the conversation, rather than protecting your image. Ask yourself, how can I make this easier for the other person to understand? When your attention shifts from yourself to your listener, your communication naturally becomes more confident and effective. Listening also plays a crucial role in thinking clearly. Too many people prepare their next response while the other person is still speaking. As a result, they miss important information and respond to something that was never actually said. Exceptional communicators listen first, think second, and speak third. This sequence may seem simple, but it changes everything. Careful listening gives your brain better information, allowing you to form stronger, more relevant responses. Another helpful technique is mentally organizing your ideas into 3 key points. Human beings naturally remember information better when it is grouped into small, manageable sections. Whether you're answering a question in an interview, leading a meeting, or explaining a concept, dividing your thoughts into 3 clear ideas keeps your message focused and easy to follow. Don't worry about finding the perfect words every time. Perfect wording is less important than clear thinking. If your ideas are organized, your language will usually follow. But if your thinking is disorganized, even an impressive vocabulary won't save your message. Remember that communication is not a performance, it is an exchange of understanding. Your goal is not to sound impressive. Your goal is to help another person understand what matters. As you practice thinking before speaking, you'll notice a remarkable change. Your conversations will become calmer. Your answers will become more structured. People will interrupt you less because your ideas will be easier to follow. Most importantly, you'll begin to feel more confident, not because you've memorized better words, but because you've learned to organize your thoughts before expressing them. Clear speech always begins with a clear mind. Before every important conversation, give yourself permission to pause, think, and speak with intention. Those few moments of preparation may seem small, but they often make the difference between simply talking and truly being heard. Chapter 3. Build a powerful vocabulary without sounding pretentious. Many people believe that becoming articulate means using long, sophisticated words that most people have never heard before. They imagine that sounding intelligent requires an impressive vocabulary filled with technical terms and elegant expressions. But the truth is almost the opposite. The greatest communicators in the world are not admired because they use the most difficult words. They are admired because they choose the right words. There is a big difference. An articulate leader doesn't speak to prove how intelligent they are. They speak to make their ideas impossible to misunderstand. Their goal is clarity, not complexity. They understand that communication succeeds only when the listener understands the message. Imagine 2 managers introducing the same idea to their team. The first says, "We need to synergize our operational methodologies to optimize organizational performance." The second simply says, "Let's work together to improve how we do things." Both statements communicate the same basic idea, but one creates confusion while the other creates clarity. Which manager would you rather work with? People rarely admire complicated language. They admire communication that is easy to understand. One of the easiest ways to strengthen your vocabulary is by becoming a curious learner. Every book you read, every podcast you listen to, every thoughtful conversation you have introduces you to new words and new ways of expressing ideas. Instead of trying to memorize long lists of vocabulary, focus on discovering words naturally through daily learning. When you encounter a word you don't know, don't just look up its definition. Pay attention to how it is used. Notice the tone it creates. Observe the situations where it fits naturally. A word is only valuable if you know when to use it. Quality always matters more than quantity. In fact, many successful leaders have surprisingly simple vocabularies. What makes them effective is precision. They choose words that say exactly what they mean. Instead of saying someone is kind of unhappy, they might say the person is frustrated. Instead of describing an idea as pretty good, they might call it practical, innovative, or effective. Precise language paints a clearer picture. This habit also reduces misunderstandings. Vague words leave room for interpretation. Specific words create certainty. Another important principle is to eliminate unnecessary filler words. Expressions like basically, actually, literally, you know, and I mean, often sneak into our conversations without adding any value. Used occasionally, they are harmless. Used constantly, they weaken your message and distract listeners. Try paying attention to your own speech for a day. You may be surprised by how often you repeat the same filler words. Becoming aware of these habits is the first step toward replacing them with intentional pauses. Silence is almost always more powerful than unnecessary words. Reading remains one of the fastest ways to improve your vocabulary, but not all reading produces the same results. Read books written by authors who communicate clearly. Read biographies of respected leaders. Read thoughtful essays, high-quality journalism, and well-written non-fiction. As you read, notice how experienced writers explain complex ideas without making them difficult. Their secret isn't using bigger words. Their secret is choosing better words. Listening is equally valuable. Pay attention to speakers you admire. Notice their rhythm, word choice, and sentence structure. Observe how they explain ideas, tell stories, and transition between topics. You don't need to copy their style, but you can learn valuable techniques that fit your own personality. One mistake many people make is trying to sound like someone else. They hear a motivational speaker, a professor, or a business executive, and begin borrowing expressions that don't feel natural. The result often sounds forced. Authenticity is more persuasive than imitation. Your goal is not to become a different person. Your goal is to become the clearest version of yourself. That means using language that feels comfortable while gradually expanding your ability to express more complex ideas. As your vocabulary grows, let it grow naturally. Don't force advanced words into conversations simply because you know them. Ask yourself one simple question before using any unfamiliar word. Will this make my message easier to understand or harder? If the answer is harder, choose a simpler alternative. Remember, the purpose of communication is not to impress your audience, it is to serve your audience. Another effective habit is replacing negative expressions with constructive ones. Compare the difference between saying, "This is a disaster," and saying, "This is a challenge we need to solve." Or compare, "That won't work," with, "Let's explore another approach." Both responses acknowledge reality, but one encourages progress while the other creates resistance. Leaders understand that words shape emotions. The language you choose influences not only how others think, but also how they feel. Positive, solution-focused language inspires confidence without ignoring difficulties. You should also develop the habit of learning one useful word each day. Not the longest word, not the most unusual word, just one practical word that helps you express yourself more accurately, then use it naturally in conversation. Over time, these small improvements compound into a remarkable transformation. Think of vocabulary as a toolbox. A carpenter doesn't carry hundreds of identical tools. They carry the right tools for different jobs. Likewise, an articulate communicator doesn't collect impressive words for display. They collect useful words that communicate ideas with accuracy, warmth, and confidence. As your vocabulary expands, your thinking becomes sharper because words shape thought. The more precisely you can describe an idea, the more clearly you understand it yourself. That clarity then appears in your conversations, presentations, and decisions. Ultimately, people won't remember you because you sounded sophisticated. They'll remember you because you made difficult ideas easy to understand. They'll remember how comfortable you made them feel, how clearly you explained your vision, and how naturally your words inspired confidence. That is the vocabulary of a true leader, not one filled with complicated words, but one built on clarity, precision, authenticity, and purpose. When your words help others understand, trust, and take action, you've achieved something far more valuable than sounding intelligent. Chapter 4. Speak with confidence, not perfection. One of the biggest myths about great speakers is that they never get nervous. We imagine confident leaders walking onto a stage, entering a meeting, or speaking in front of a crowd without a single doubt crossing their minds. The truth is far more encouraging. Even the most experienced speakers feel nervous. The difference is that they don't wait for fear to disappear before they speak. They speak despite it. Many people postpone important conversations because they believe they need to feel completely confident first. They tell themselves, "I'll speak up when I'm more prepared. I'll share my ideas when I'm more experienced. I'll volunteer to present when I'm no longer nervous." But confidence doesn't arrive before action. Confidence is the result of action. Think back to the first time you learned to ride a bicycle, drive a car, or use a new piece of technology. You probably weren't confident on day one. You made mistakes, felt uncertain, and questioned yourself. Yet every attempt made you a little more comfortable. Speaking works the same way. Every conversation, presentation, and meeting is another opportunity to build confidence. The desire to be perfect is one of the greatest enemies of effective communication. Perfection creates pressure. It convinces you that every sentence must be flawless, every answer must be immediate, and every word must be impressive. Under that pressure, your mind becomes tense. You begin overthinking every phrase, worrying about mistakes, and judging yourself while you're still speaking. Ironically, this pursuit of perfection often causes the very mistakes you're trying to avoid. Confident communicators think differently. They understand that people don't expect perfection. They expect honesty, clarity, and authenticity. A small stumble, a forgotten word, or a brief pause rarely damages your credibility. In fact, these moments often make you seem more human and relatable. Imagine two candidates during a job interview. Both accidentally mispronounce a word. The first immediately apologizes 3 times, becomes flustered, and spends the next several minutes trying to recover. The second smiles briefly, corrects the word, and continues speaking naturally. Which candidate appears more confident? Most people would choose the second, not because they made fewer mistakes, but because they refused to let one mistake define the conversation. This is an important lesson. Confidence isn't the absence of mistakes. It is the ability to recover gracefully from them. Another habit that quietly weakens confidence is the overuse of filler words. Words such as like, you know, and basically often appear when our minds are searching for the next thought. While everyone uses them occasionally, repeating them too often distracts listeners and makes your message seem uncertain. Fortunately, there's a simple solution. Replace filler words with silence. A brief pause may feel uncomfortable to you, but to your audience, it sounds thoughtful and composed. Skilled speakers understand that silence gives listeners time to absorb important ideas. Instead of rushing to fill every quiet moment, they allow their message to breathe. Your pace also influences how confident you appear. Nervous people often speak too quickly because they're eager to finish. Their words blend together, important points lose emphasis, and listeners struggle to keep up. Slowing down doesn't make you sound less intelligent, it makes you sound more intentional. When you reduce your speed slightly, your brain has more time to organize thoughts, your voice becomes steadier, and your audience finds it easier to follow your message. Calm speech creates calm listeners. Body language plays an equally important role. Long before people analyze your words, they notice how you carry yourself. Standing upright, maintaining comfortable eye contact, and using relaxed gestures communicate quiet confidence. On the other hand, constantly looking down, avoiding eye contact, or fidgeting excessively can unintentionally signal uncertainty. Remember, confidence is communicated by your entire presence, not just your vocabulary. Your voice matters as well. Speaking clearly, varying your tone, and emphasizing important ideas make your message more engaging. A flat, rushed voice often loses attention, while a steady, expressive voice naturally holds it. You don't need a deep or dramatic voice to sound confident. You simply need to speak with purpose. Another powerful mindset shift is learning to focus on helping instead of performing. Many people become nervous because they make communication about themselves. They wonder, what if I sound foolish? What if people judge me? What if I forget what I wanted to say? These thoughts increase anxiety because they place all the attention on your own performance. Instead, ask yourself a different question. How can I help the people listening? Perhaps you're sharing an idea that could improve a project. Maybe you're explaining a solution to a problem. Perhaps you're encouraging someone who needs support. When your goal becomes serving your audience rather than impressing them, much of your fear begins to disappear. Confidence grows when purpose becomes greater than self-consciousness. It's also important to remember that confidence is built long before important moments arrive. It develops through everyday conversations. Every time you introduce yourself to someone new, ask a thoughtful question, contribute an idea during a meeting, or explain a concept clearly, you're strengthening the communication muscles that will support you in larger situations. Small moments create big transformations. Don't wait for the perfect opportunity to practice. Practice every day. Speak a little more clearly during ordinary conversations. Slow down instead of rushing. Replace one filler word with one deliberate pause. Maintain eye contact for an extra second. Share one idea you might normally keep to yourself. These small improvements seem insignificant on their own, but together they reshape how you communicate. Perhaps the greatest secret of confident speakers is this: they accept that growth never ends. Even experienced leaders continue refining their communication. They still prepare before important presentations. They still learn from feedback. They still improve with every conversation. Confidence is not a destination you eventually reach. It is a habit you build through consistent action. As you continue through this audiobook, remember that your goal is not to become a perfect speaker. Perfect speakers don't exist. Your goal is to become a clear, calm, and authentic communicator whose words reflect confidence because they come from preparation, purpose, and practice. People are not inspired by perfection. They are inspired by sincerity, and when you stop chasing perfection, you create space for something far more powerful, genuine confidence. That confidence doesn't just change the way you speak. It changes the way people listen, respond, and believe in your ability to lead. Chapter 5. The Art of Clear and Concise Communication. Have you ever listened to someone explain an idea for 10 minutes, only to finish the conversation wondering what they were actually trying to say? It can be frustrating. The speaker may have been knowledgeable, enthusiastic, and well-intentioned, yet their message became lost in unnecessary details. Now think about the opposite experience. Someone explains a complex problem in just a few simple sentences, and suddenly everything makes sense. You immediately understand the idea, the goal, and the next step. That is the power of clear and concise communication. Many people mistakenly believe that speaking longer makes them sound more intelligent. In reality, the ability to express a complex idea simply is often a sign of deep understanding. The more clearly you understand something, the more clearly you can explain it. Great leaders don't overwhelm people with information. They organize it. Imagine you're leading a team meeting. Instead of listing every challenge, every statistic, and every possibility, you begin by saying, "We have one goal today: improve customer satisfaction. We'll focus on 3 areas: response time, communication, and service quality." In just one sentence, everyone understands the purpose of the meeting. From there, each discussion has direction. This is one of the simplest communication principles you can apply. Lead with the main idea. Don't make people search for your point. Give it to them early. Whether you're answering a question in an interview, presenting to clients, or explaining a plan to your family, start with the conclusion or the central message. Once your audience understands where you're going, they're much more likely to follow the journey. Another habit of articulate communicators is removing unnecessary words. Many of us add phrases that contribute little to the message. We repeat the same idea in different ways, include details that don't matter, or explain something long after the listener has already understood it. While we often do this out of nervousness or enthusiasm, it can weaken our impact. Imagine someone asking you what time a meeting begins. One response is, "Well, if I'm remembering correctly, and I think I am, it should probably start around 9 o'clock, unless something has changed." A clearer response is simply, "The meeting starts at 9. The second answer is confident, respectful of the listener's time, and leaves no room for confusion. Being concise does not mean being cold or abrupt. It means saying enough to communicate your message effectively without saying more than necessary. Think of your words as valuable resources. Use them intentionally. Structure also plays a vital role in clarity. When people struggle to explain something, it's often because their ideas are presented in a random order. Instead of moving logically from one point to the next, they jump back and forth, forcing listeners to assemble the message themselves. A simple way to avoid this is to organize your thoughts before speaking. Start by introducing the topic, then explain the key points in a logical sequence. Finally, summarize the most important takeaway or next step. This structure works in almost every situation. It gives your audience a clear path to follow and prevents your message from becoming scattered. Examples and stories can also improve clarity, but only when they support your message. A relevant example helps people visualize an idea and remember it longer. An unrelated story, however, distracts from the main point. Ask yourself, does this example make my message clearer? If the answer is yes, include it. If not, leave it out. Another characteristic of concise communicators is that they avoid trying to sound impressive. They choose familiar words whenever possible because their goal is understanding, not admiration. They know that people appreciate simplicity. One of the world's greatest scientists, Albert Einstein, is often credited with the idea that if you can't explain something simply, you may not understand it well enough. Whether or not he expressed those exact words, the principle remains true. Simplicity requires mastery. Listening is equally important in clear communication. Before responding, make sure you've understood what the other person actually means. Too many misunderstandings occur because people answer the question they expected rather than the one that was asked. When you're uncertain, ask a clarifying question. It demonstrates respect, prevents confusion, and often leads to a more productive conversation. Clarity also depends on confidence. When you're unsure of yourself, you're more likely to over-explain, repeat your points, or qualify every statement with phrases like, "I think," "maybe," or "I'm not sure." While humility is valuable, excessive hesitation weakens your message. If you've prepared well and know your subject, trust your knowledge, speak with calm certainty. That doesn't mean pretending to know everything. If you don't know the answer, simply admit it and commit to finding the information. Clear communication includes honest communication. Perhaps the most overlooked part of concise communication is knowing when to stop speaking. Some of the strongest messages are followed by silence. After making an important point, pause. Give your audience a moment to think. Resist the urge to keep talking just because the room becomes quiet. Often, that brief silence is where understanding begins. As you practice, challenge yourself to make every conversation a little clearer than the last. Before speaking, ask yourself, what is the one idea I want people to remember? If your audience remembers that one idea, you've succeeded. In a world filled with endless noise, constant distractions, and overwhelming information, clarity has become a rare and valuable skill. People are naturally drawn to those who make complicated things simple, confusing situations understandable, and difficult decisions easier to navigate. When you master the art of clear and concise communication, your words gain power. People stop merely hearing you, they begin understanding you, and when people truly understand your message, they are far more likely to trust your judgment, remember your ideas, and follow your leadership. Chapter 6. Think quickly, under pressure. Everyone has experienced that moment. Someone asks an unexpected question during a meeting. An interviewer challenges one of your answers. A client raises an objection you didn't anticipate. Suddenly, your mind goes blank. Your heart beats faster. Your thoughts become scattered, and the perfect response seems to disappear. Then, hours later, while driving home or lying in bed, the ideal answer suddenly appears. Why does this happen? It isn't because you're unintelligent. It isn't because you lack knowledge. More often, it's because pressure changes the way your brain processes information. When you feel judged or rushed, your mind shifts into survival mode. Instead of thinking clearly, it focuses on avoiding mistakes. The encouraging news is that thinking quickly isn't an inborn talent. It is a skill that can be developed with practice. The first step is changing how you define speed. Many people assume thinking quickly means responding instantly. But the fastest answer isn't always the best answer. Great leaders understand that a thoughtful response delivered after a brief pause is far more valuable than an immediate response filled with confusion. Never be afraid of silence. A 2-second pause may feel long to you, but it often feels perfectly natural to everyone else. Those few seconds allow your brain to organize information before your mouth begins speaking. Imagine you're giving a presentation when someone asks a difficult question you weren't expecting. Instead of panicking, smile, maintain eye contact and say, "That's an excellent question." While those simple words leave your mouth, your brain gains valuable time to think, then repeat or briefly summarize the question. So you're asking how this strategy would work if market conditions suddenly changed. Repeating the question accomplishes 3 important things. It confirms you've understood it correctly. It gives your audience confidence that you're listening carefully. Most importantly, it buys your mind another few seconds to organize a clear response. This is a technique used by experienced leaders, executives, professors, and public speakers around the world. Another powerful habit is learning to organize your answer before you begin. One of the easiest methods is the rule of 3. Instead of trying to say everything you know, divide your response into 3 key points. For example, if someone asks, "What makes a good leader?" Rather than speaking randomly for several minutes, you might say, "I believe great leadership comes down to 3 qualities: clear communication, consistent action, and genuine concern for people." Now your audience knows exactly where you're going, and your brain has a simple roadmap to follow. Structure reduces stress. When your thoughts have a framework, pressure becomes easier to manage. Another reason people struggle under pressure is that they become emotionally attached to giving the perfect answer. They fear saying something wrong, so they overanalyze every sentence before speaking. Ironically, this overthinking slows the mind. Instead of chasing perfection, focus on progress. Remember that people are rarely looking for flawless answers. They're looking for honest, thoughtful, and practical ones. Sometimes the best response is simply acknowledging uncertainty. Imagine a manager being asked about a problem they haven't fully investigated. An insecure leader might invent an answer to appear knowledgeable. A confident leader says, "I don't have enough information to answer that accurately right now. Let me review the details and give you a reliable answer." That response builds credibility because honesty creates trust. Quick thinking also depends on preparation. Professional athletes don't wait until game day to practice. Musicians don't rehearse only during concerts. Likewise, articulate communicators prepare before important conversations. If you have an interview tomorrow, anticipate likely questions. If you're leading a meeting, imagine possible objections. If you're giving a presentation, prepare for difficult questions. Preparation doesn't eliminate surprises, but it reduces their impact. Another valuable technique is learning to separate facts from emotions. Pressure often causes emotional reactions before logical thinking has time to catch up. Suppose a coworker criticizes your proposal during a meeting. Your immediate emotional reaction might be defensiveness, but instead of responding emotionally, pause and ask yourself, what problem are they actually trying to solve? This shift changes the conversation completely. Instead of arguing, you begin exploring solutions. Great leaders solve problems. They don't win arguments. Curiosity is another secret weapon of quick thinkers. When faced with an unfamiliar question, don't assume you must immediately provide the perfect answer. Ask thoughtful follow-up questions. For example, what specifically concerns you about this approach? Can you give me an example? Which part would you like me to explain further? Questions do more than gather information. They slow the conversation, reduce misunderstandings, and often reveal that the problem is simpler than it first appeared. Many outstanding communicators spend as much time asking questions as answering them. Mental flexibility is equally important. Sometimes conversations change direction unexpectedly. New information appears. Priorities shift. An articulate leader adapts instead of resisting. They don't cling stubbornly to prepared scripts. They listen, think, adjust, and continue moving the conversation forward. This flexibility comes from understanding ideas deeply rather than memorizing exact words. If you truly understand a subject, you can explain it in different ways depending on the situation. Another habit worth developing is thinking in principles instead of memorized sentences. Suppose someone asks you about leadership. If you've memorized one perfect answer, any unexpected follow-up question may leave you struggling. But if you understand the principles of leadership, trust, communication, accountability, vision, and service, you can naturally adapt your response to almost any situation. Knowledge creates confidence. Understanding creates flexibility. Pressure also affects breathing. Many people unknowingly hold their breath when they become nervous. This reduces oxygen, increases tension, and makes thinking more difficult. Before answering an important question, take one slow, controlled breath. It's a small action, but it calms both the body and the mind. Your thoughts become clearer almost immediately. Another important lesson is learning that you don't have to answer every question immediately. Sometimes the best response is, "That's an important point. Let me think about it for a moment." Or, "I'd like to give you a thoughtful answer rather than a rushed one." Far from making you appear weak, these statements demonstrate maturity and confidence. People respect those who value accuracy more than speed. Over time, you'll begin noticing something remarkable. Situations that once made you panic will begin feeling familiar. Unexpected questions won't seem threatening. Difficult conversations won't feel overwhelming. Your mind will remain calmer because you've trained it to organize thoughts under pressure instead of reacting emotionally. Like every communication skill in this audiobook, quick thinking develops through repetition. Practice answering random questions aloud. Challenge yourself to summarize books, articles, or experiences in 1 minute. Discuss ideas with friends. Participate in meetings. Volunteer for presentations. Every conversation becomes a training ground. The goal isn't to become someone who always has the perfect answer. The goal is to become someone who remains calm when others become anxious, thoughtful when others become reactive, and clear when others become confused. Because true leadership isn't measured by how quickly you speak. It's measured by how clearly you think when the pressure is greatest. When your mind stays calm, your words become stronger, And when your words remain strong under pressure, people naturally begin to trust your judgment, your leadership, and your ability to guide them through uncertainty. Chapter 7. Master the language of influence. Every day, people try to influence others. A parent encourages a child to make better choices. A manager motivates a team to achieve a challenging goal. An entrepreneur convinces investors to believe in a vision. A teacher inspires students to think differently. Even a friend persuades another friend to try something new. Influence is part of everyday life, yet many people misunderstand what influence really means. They imagine it as manipulation, pressure, or clever persuasion. In reality, genuine influence has very little to do with controlling people. It has everything to do with earning their trust. People rarely follow someone because they were forced to. They follow someone because they believe. That belief begins with communication. The most influential leaders understand a simple truth. Facts inform, but emotions inspire action. You can present the strongest evidence, the clearest statistics, and the most logical arguments, but if people feel no emotional connection to your message, they are unlikely to act on it. This doesn't mean ignoring logic. It means combining logic with emotion. Imagine you're trying to convince your team to embrace a major change. You could spend an hour discussing numbers, projections, and technical details, or you could begin with a story about a customer whose experience revealed why the change is necessary. The facts explain the decision, but the story helps people care about it. Stories give ideas a human face. That is why memorable leaders are often memorable storytellers. A good story doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's simply a personal experience, a lesson learned from failure, or an example that helps people visualize an idea. Stories make abstract concepts concrete. They allow listeners to see themselves in the message. Another powerful communication tool is framing. The way you present an idea often influences how people receive it. Imagine a leader announcing a difficult project. One says, "This is going to be extremely difficult and will probably face many problems." Another says, "This project will challenge us, but it's an opportunity to grow, improve, and prove what we're capable of." Both statements acknowledge difficulty, but the second creates hope. Leaders don't ignore reality. They frame reality in a way that encourages action instead of fear. The words you choose shape the emotional atmosphere around you. If your language is consistently negative, people begin expecting failure. If your language is realistic yet optimistic, people become more willing to face challenges together. This is why influential communicators avoid unnecessary criticism. They understand that correction is sometimes necessary, but constant negativity weakens motivation. Instead of saying, "You did everything wrong," they might say, "Here's what worked well, and here's how we can make it even better." The message is similar. The emotional impact is completely different. Influence also depends on credibility. People ask themselves two questions before accepting advice from anyone. Can I trust this person? Do they genuinely care about me? If either answer is no, influence becomes difficult. This is why consistency matters. Your actions must support your words. If you encourage punctuality but constantly arrive late, your message loses strength. If you ask others to remain calm while you react emotionally under pressure, people notice the contradiction. Integrity amplifies communication. The strongest arguments become weak when the speaker lacks credibility. Conversely, even simple messages become powerful when spoken by someone who consistently lives according to their values. Another secret of influential communicators is empathy. Before trying to change someone's mind, they first try to understand it. Instead of asking, "How can I win this conversation?" they ask, "Why does this person see the situation differently?" This shift changes everything. People become less defensive when they feel understood. Listening carefully before responding demonstrates respect, and respect creates openness. When someone feels heard, they become far more willing to hear you. Influence is built through connection before persuasion. Questions are another overlooked leadership tool. Many people assume influential speakers always have the best answers. Often they simply ask the best questions. Questions encourage reflection. They invite participation instead of resistance. Rather than saying, "You're wrong," an effective leader might ask, "What outcome are we hoping to achieve?" Instead of demanding agreement, they guide people toward discovering better solutions themselves. People are far more committed to ideas they help create than ideas forced upon them. Your tone of voice also shapes influence. The exact same sentence can sound encouraging, sarcastic, respectful, or dismissive, depending on how it is spoken. Confident leaders rarely need to raise their voices. Calmness communicates strength. Speaking with steady confidence encourages people to focus on your message instead of your emotions. Body language reinforces that message. Open posture, comfortable eye contact, and relaxed gestures make people feel safe engaging with you. Crossed arms, constant distractions, or aggressive movements often create unnecessary tension. Remember, communication is never just verbal. People are always listening with both their ears and their eyes. Another essential principle is to avoid trying to win every argument. Winning an argument but losing a relationship is rarely a successful outcome. Great leaders know that preserving trust is often more valuable than proving themselves right. Sometimes influence means knowing when to stop talking. When emotions become too intense, forcing the conversation further usually creates more resistance. A thoughtful pause or a decision to continue the discussion later often leads to better results than continuing a heated debate. Patience is a form of influence. Finally, remember that genuine influence takes time. One conversation rarely changes someone's beliefs overnight. Trust is built through repeated experiences. Consistency matters more than occasional brilliance. Every honest conversation, every promise you keep, every respectful disagreement, and every thoughtful decision strengthens your influence. People begin noticing patterns. They learn that your words are dependable. They believe what you say because your actions consistently support it. That is the foundation of leadership. You don't influence people by sounding powerful. You influence them by helping them feel understood, respected, and inspired. As your communication grows more intentional, you'll discover that influence is no longer about convincing everyone to agree with you. Instead, it becomes the ability to create clarity where there is confusion, hope where there is uncertainty, and confidence where there is doubt. When your words consistently encourage people to think more clearly, act more courageously, and become better versions of themselves, you are doing more than communicating. You are leading. And that is the true language of influence. Chapter 8. Listen like a leader. When people think about becoming better communicators, they usually focus on speaking. They search for stronger vocabulary, more confident body language, and persuasive techniques. While all of these skills matter, they overlook one ability that quietly separates extraordinary leaders from ordinary ones. Great leaders are exceptional listeners. In fact, the quality of your communication is determined just as much by how well you listen as by how well you speak. Think about the people you enjoy talking to most. They may not always have the funniest stories or the smartest opinions, but they make you feel heard. They pay attention. They don't interrupt every few seconds. They ask thoughtful questions. They remember details from previous conversations. When you're with them, you feel valued. That feeling is powerful. People may forget your exact words, but they rarely forget how you made them feel. And few things make someone feel more respected than being genuinely listened to. Unfortunately, listening has become increasingly rare. In a world filled with smartphones, constant notifications, and endless distractions, many conversations have become competitions rather than connections. Instead of listening to understand, people listen to reply. They prepare their next sentence while the other person is still speaking. As a result, they miss not only words but also emotions, concerns, and opportunities to build trust. Listening like a leader requires a different mindset. Your goal is not to prove that you're right. Your goal is to understand. That sounds simple, but it requires discipline. It means resisting the urge to interrupt with your own experiences. It means allowing people to finish their thoughts before offering advice. It means paying attention not only to what they say, but also to what they don't say. Often the most important part of a conversation lies beneath the words. Imagine an employee says, "I'm having trouble keeping up with this project." An average manager hears a complaint. A great leader hears something deeper. Perhaps the employee is overwhelmed. Maybe they lack resources. Maybe they're afraid of disappointing the team. The words reveal the problem. Listening reveals the person. This ability to hear emotions behind language is known as emotional awareness, and it is one of the most valuable leadership skills you can develop. People don't always express their true concerns directly. Sometimes they soften their words to avoid conflict. Sometimes they hide frustration behind humor. Sometimes they remain silent because they don't feel safe speaking honestly. Leaders pay attention to these signals. They notice changes in tone, facial expressions, body language, and energy. They recognize when someone says, "Everything's fine," while clearly communicating the opposite. Of course, emotional awareness doesn't mean making assumptions. It means becoming curious. Instead of concluding what someone feels, ask thoughtful questions. What has been the biggest challenge? How are you feeling about this situation? What support would help you the most? Questions like these invite honesty instead of forcing it. They show people that your interest is genuine. In many cases, people don't need immediate solutions. They need someone willing to understand them first. This is why asking questions is often more powerful than giving answers. Many leaders believe they must always provide advice, but advice given too early can make people feel unheard. Imagine a friend tells you they've had a difficult day at work. Before they've finished explaining, you immediately offer solutions. Although your intentions are good, your friend may feel that you're trying to fix the problem instead of understanding it. Now imagine a different response. You ask, "What happened?" You listen carefully. You ask another question. You allow them to finish. Only then do you ask, "Would you like my opinion?" This approach builds trust because it demonstrates respect. Another essential listening habit is avoiding distractions. When someone is speaking to you, give them your full attention. Put away your phone. Maintain comfortable eye contact. Face them directly. These small actions communicate something important. You matter. People notice when your attention is divided. Even brief glances at a screen can make someone feel less important than whatever notification just appeared. Presence is one of the greatest gifts you can offer another person. Listening also requires patience. Not everyone expresses themselves quickly. Some people need time to organize their thoughts. If you constantly interrupt or finish other people's sentences, you may unintentionally silence valuable ideas. Give people room to think. Silence isn't always awkward. Sometimes, silence is where deeper conversations begin. Another skill practiced by exceptional listeners is paraphrasing. After someone explains a complicated issue, summarize what you've heard. For example, "So if I understand correctly, your biggest concern is meeting the deadline without sacrificing quality." This simple habit accomplishes two things. First, it confirms whether you've understood correctly. Second, it reassures the other person that you've been paying attention. Misunderstandings decrease dramatically when people feel accurately heard. Listening also strengthens your ability to speak. That may seem surprising, but it's true. The more carefully you listen, the better you understand your audience. You learn what matters to them, what concerns them, what motivates them, and what language resonates with them. As a result, your responses become more relevant and persuasive. You stop delivering rehearsed speeches. Instead, you have meaningful conversations. Great communicators adapt because they first understand. Humility plays an important role as well. Listening requires accepting that you don't know everything. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to learn. Regardless of someone's position, age, or background, they possess experiences and perspectives you don't have. Approach conversations with curiosity rather than certainty. Ask yourself, What can I learn from this person? That single question transforms ordinary discussions into opportunities for growth. Another important lesson is knowing when not to speak. Some moments don't require advice. They require encouragement. Others don't require opinions. They require compassion. Sometimes your quiet presence communicates more than a lengthy explanation ever could. People often remember those who stood beside them during difficult moments far more than those who offered perfect solutions. As you continue developing your communication skills, remember this truth: the best speakers are almost always excellent listeners. Why? Because listening builds understanding. Understanding builds trust. Trust builds influence. And influence is the foundation of leadership. Imagine becoming the kind of person others seek out, not because you always have the answers, but because they know you'll genuinely listen. Imagine your co-workers feeling comfortable sharing ideas with you. Imagine your family feeling understood. Imagine your team becoming more engaged because they know their voices matter. These outcomes don't happen through impressive speeches. They happen through consistent, intentional listening. Every conversation offers a choice. You can listen just long enough to respond, or you can listen deeply enough to understand. One approach creates noise, the other creates connection. The greatest leaders choose connection because they know that before people are willing to follow your words, they first need to believe that you have listened to theirs. Leadership begins not when you speak, it begins when someone feels heard. And once people know you truly understand them, they become far more willing to trust your guidance, embrace your ideas, and walk beside you toward a shared vision. Chapter 9. Command every conversation. Every conversation is an opportunity. It may be an opportunity to build trust, solve a problem, strengthen a relationship, or inspire action. Yet many people enter conversations without direction. They react instead of respond, speak without listening, and focus more on being right than on being effective. As a result, conversations that could have created understanding often end in frustration. Leaders approach conversations differently. They don't simply participate in them, they guide them. They create an environment where people feel heard, respected, and motivated to move toward a common goal. This is what it means to command a conversation. Commanding a conversation does not mean dominating it. It doesn't mean speaking the loudest, interrupting others, or controlling every word that is spoken. In fact, people who constantly try to dominate discussions often lose influence rather than gain it. Others become defensive, disengaged, or unwilling to contribute. True leadership is not about controlling the conversation. It is about guiding its direction while allowing everyone to feel valued. The most respected communicators know when to speak, when to listen, when to ask questions, and when to simply allow silence to do its work. Every successful conversation begins with a clear purpose. Before speaking, ask yourself a simple question. What do I want this conversation to accomplish? Perhaps you want to solve a problem, clarify a misunderstanding, motivate your team, or strengthen a relationship. When your purpose is clear, your words naturally become more focused. Without a purpose, conversations often drift from one topic to another, leaving everyone confused about what was actually accomplished. Leaders rarely speak without intention. Their words move conversations toward meaningful outcomes. One of the greatest strengths of articulate leaders is their ability to remain calm when emotions begin to rise. Disagreements are inevitable. Different personalities, opinions, and experiences guarantee that conflicts will occur. However, conflict itself is not the problem. The real problem is how people respond to it. Many individuals react emotionally. They interrupt, become defensive, raise their voices, or begin attacking the person instead of addressing the issue. In those moments, communication stops, and arguments begin. A leader understands that emotional control is a competitive advantage. The calmer you remain, the more clearly you think. And the more clearly you think, the better decisions you make. Imagine a team meeting where two colleagues begin arguing about the best approach to a project. One insists on moving quickly, while the other believes more planning is necessary. The discussion becomes increasingly heated, and everyone else in the room grows uncomfortable. An average manager might choose a side immediately or simply tell everyone to calm down. An exceptional leader takes a different approach. Instead of focusing on who is right, they shift the conversation toward the shared objective. They might say, "It sounds like both of you want this project to succeed. One is focused on speed, while the other is focused on quality. Let's explore how we can achieve both." In a single statement, the leader reduces tension, acknowledges both perspectives, and redirects the conversation toward collaboration. This is leadership in action. One of the most effective ways to guide conversations is by asking thoughtful questions. Questions encourage people to think rather than defend themselves. They invite participation instead of resistance. Compare these two responses. The first says, "You're looking at this the wrong way." The second asks, "What led you to that conclusion?" The first response creates conflict. The second creates curiosity. Questions lower emotional barriers because they communicate respect. They tell the other person, "I want to understand your perspective before asking you to understand mine." This simple shift transforms difficult conversations into productive ones. Another important skill is learning how to redirect conversations without making people feel dismissed. Every meeting eventually drifts off course. Someone introduces an unrelated topic, tells a long story, or begins discussing an issue that can be addressed later. If left unchecked, valuable time disappears. Effective leaders gently guide everyone back to the original purpose. They might say, "That's an important point, and I'd like to come back to it. For now, let's finish discussing today's priority." Notice that this approach doesn't reject the person's contribution. It simply places it in the appropriate context. People feel respected while the conversation remains productive. Many people assume that confidence comes from always having the perfect answer. In reality, confidence often comes from being comfortable saying, "I don't know." There will be moments when someone asks a question you cannot answer immediately. Resist the temptation to invent an explanation just to protect your image. Honesty builds far more credibility than false certainty. A leader who says, "I don't have enough information to answer that accurately, but I'll find out," earns respect because people know they value truth more than ego. Commanding conversations also requires emotional intelligence. Every person enters a conversation carrying invisible experiences, concerns, and expectations. Sometimes the words people speak are only part of the message. A frustrated employee may actually be feeling overwhelmed. A quiet team member may have valuable ideas but lack confidence. A customer who sounds angry may simply feel ignored. Great leaders listen beneath the words. They recognize emotions without becoming controlled by them. This allows them to respond to the real issue rather than just the surface complaint. Equally important is the ability to adapt your communication style to different people. Not everyone processes information in the same way. Some people prefer direct and concise explanations. Others appreciate detailed reasoning before making decisions. Some respond to data and evidence, while others are motivated by stories and vision. Articulate leaders observe these differences and adjust accordingly. They understand that effective communication is not about speaking the way you prefer. It is about speaking in a way the other person understands. Flexibility is not weakness, it is wisdom. Your body language influences conversations just as much as your words. Crossing your arms, avoiding eye contact, checking your phone, or constantly interrupting sends powerful messages that may contradict what you're saying. On the other hand, maintaining comfortable eye contact, keeping an open posture, nodding while others speak, and allowing people to finish their thoughts communicate confidence and respect. Often people decide whether they trust you before they fully process your words. Your presence speaks before your voice does. Another powerful habit is learning to summarize discussions before moving forward. At the end of an important conversation, briefly review the key points and confirm the next steps. You might say, "So we've agreed on 3 things. First, we'll complete the research by Friday. Second, We'll review the results together on Monday. Third, we'll finalize the proposal by the end of next week. This simple summary eliminates confusion, creates accountability, and ensures everyone leaves with the same understanding. Clear endings are just as important as strong beginnings. Not every conversation will end with complete agreement, and that's perfectly acceptable. Leadership is not measured by how many arguments you win. It is measured by how many relationships you preserve while moving people closer to meaningful solutions. You can disagree respectfully without becoming disagreeable. In fact, respectful disagreement often strengthens trust because it demonstrates maturity and emotional control. People are more willing to continue working with someone who treats them with dignity, even during conflict. Finally, remember that commanding a conversation is not about controlling other people. It is about controlling yourself. It is the discipline to remain calm when others become emotional, the patience to listen before responding, the wisdom to ask thoughtful questions, and the courage to guide discussions towards solutions instead of blame. These qualities cannot be developed overnight, but they grow stronger with every conversation you intentionally practice. Every discussion you have, whether with family, friends, colleagues, clients, or strangers, is shaping your reputation as a communicator and as a leader. People may not remember every word you spoke, but they will remember how they felt after talking with you. Did they feel respected? Did they feel understood? Did they leave with greater clarity and confidence than when they arrived? When you consistently create conversations that answer those questions with a yes, you become more than someone who communicates well. You become someone people trust in difficult moments, someone they seek for guidance when uncertainty arises, and someone whose presence brings calm instead of confusion. That is the true meaning of commanding every conversation. It is not about having power over people. It is about using your words, your attitude, and your character to bring out the best in them, and that is one of the greatest qualities any leader can possess. Chapter 10. Speak with authority in public. For many people, speaking in public is one of the most intimidating experiences imaginable. Whether it's presenting in a meeting, giving a speech at an event, leading a workshop, or simply introducing yourself to a room full of strangers, the fear feels real. Your heart races. Your hands become cold. Your mouth feels dry. Thoughts that seemed perfectly organized a few moments ago suddenly disappear. If you've ever experienced this, you're not alone. Even accomplished leaders, successful entrepreneurs, and experienced speakers admit that they still feel nervous before important presentations. The difference is not that they have eliminated fear. The difference is that they have learned to manage it. Authority is not the absence of nervousness. Authority is the ability to communicate with confidence despite feeling nervous. Many people mistakenly believe that authority comes from having a deep voice, using complicated words, or standing in front of a large audience. In reality, authority comes from something much simpler. It comes from conviction. When you genuinely believe in your message and deliver it with clarity, people naturally pay attention. The first step towards speaking with authority is preparation. Confidence rarely appears by accident. It grows from knowing your subject well enough that you don't need to memorize every sentence. Many inexperienced speakers make the mistake of memorizing an entire presentation word for word. The problem is that if they forget one sentence, their confidence begins to collapse. Experienced speakers prepare differently. They master their ideas instead of memorizing their words. When you understand your message deeply, you can explain it naturally. If you lose your place, you simply continue because you know where you're going. Your speech becomes a conversation instead of a performance. Preparation also means understanding your audience. Before every presentation, ask yourself 3 important questions. Who am I speaking to? What matters most to them? What is the one idea I want them to remember? When your presentation is designed around your audience rather than yourself, your message becomes far more engaging. One of the most powerful tools in public speaking is the pause. Many people fear silence. They rush from one sentence to the next because they worry that any pause will make them appear uncertain. In reality, the opposite is true. Confident speakers pause. A pause gives your audience time to absorb important ideas. It allows you to breathe, organize your next thought, and emphasize key points. Imagine listening to someone who speaks continuously without stopping. Their message quickly becomes exhausting. Now imagine a speaker who slows down, pauses after meaningful statements, and gives each idea room to breathe. Which speaker commands more attention? Almost always, it is the second. Your pace is equally important. When people become nervous, they naturally begin speaking faster. They want to finish as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, this creates several problems. Their words become difficult to understand, their breathing becomes shallow, and the audience struggles to keep up. Instead, deliberately slow your pace. Speaking slightly slower than feels natural often sounds perfectly normal to your audience. More importantly, it communicates confidence. People instinctively associate calm speech with calm thinking. Your voice also deserves attention. You don't need an unusually deep or powerful voice to sound authoritative. What matters is variety. Change your tone to match your message. Lower your voice when discussing something serious. Increase your energy when sharing exciting news. Emphasize important words. Avoid speaking in the same rhythm from beginning to end. A dynamic voice keeps people engaged. A monotone voice encourages them to drift away. Body language is another essential part of public speaking. Long before your audience evaluates your ideas, they notice how you carry yourself. Stand upright with relaxed shoulders. Keep your movements natural. Make comfortable eye contact across different sections of the room, instead of staring at one person or looking only at your notes. Imagine two presenters delivering the exact same message. One keeps looking at the floor, avoids eye contact, and nervously shifts from one foot to the other. The second stands calmly, smiles naturally, looks around the room, and speaks with steady movements. Although their words are identical, the audience is far more likely to trust the second speaker. Authority is communicated before the first sentence is spoken. Another mistake many speakers make is trying to appear perfect. They become so concerned about avoiding mistakes that they lose their authenticity. Ironically, audiences rarely expect perfection. They appreciate sincerity. If you briefly lose your train of thought, pause and continue. If you mispronounce a word, correct it and move forward. Most people will forget the mistake within seconds. What they will remember is how confidently you recovered. Stories are one of the strongest tools available to any speaker. Facts inform the mind. Stories engage both the mind and the heart. Whenever possible, illustrate your ideas with real experiences, relatable situations, or memorable examples. Stories help audiences connect emotionally with your message, making it easier to understand and remember. However, keep your stories purposeful. Every story should reinforce your central message rather than distract from it. Another important principle is to focus on serving your audience instead of impressing them. Many speakers become anxious because they constantly ask themselves, "How am I doing? Do I sound intelligent? What if they don't like me?" These thoughts increase self-consciousness. Instead, ask a different question. How can I make this valuable for the people listening? When your attention shifts toward helping others learn, grow, or solve a problem, much of your nervousness begins to fade. Your audience stops feeling like judges and starts feeling like people you've come to serve. Always finish with purpose. One of the biggest mistakes speakers make is ending weakly. They say things like, "Well, that's about it," or "I guess that's everything I wanted to cover." Instead, conclude by reinforcing your main message. Leave your audience with one clear idea they can remember and apply. People may forget individual details, but they often remember the final impression. A strong ending gives your presentation lasting impact. As you continue practicing public speaking, remember that authority is not measured by the size of your audience. Whether you're speaking to one person, 10 colleagues, or 1,000 people, the principles remain the same. Prepare thoroughly, speak clearly, pause intentionally, listen to your audience. Focus on serving rather than impressing. Every presentation becomes an opportunity to grow. Every speech builds confidence. Every conversation strengthens your voice. Eventually, something remarkable happens. The stage no longer feels like a place of fear. It becomes a place of opportunity. Instead of worrying about being evaluated, you begin focusing on creating value. Instead of trying to prove yourself, you begin sharing ideas that genuinely help others. That is when public speaking changes from a challenge into a privilege, because speaking with authority is not about commanding attention through volume or status. It is about earning attention through clarity, confidence, authenticity, and purpose. And when people leave your presentation feeling informed, inspired, and ready to take action, you have done far more than deliver a speech. You have led. Chapter 11. Communicate like an exceptional leader. Leadership is not defined by a title, a corner office, or the number of people who report to you. True leadership is reflected in how you communicate. Long before people decide whether to follow your direction, they decide whether they trust your words. Every conversation, every meeting, and every decision either strengthens that trust or weakens it. Exceptional leaders understand that communication is more than sharing information. It is about creating clarity, building confidence, and helping people move toward a common goal. They don't simply tell people what to do, they help people understand why it matters. One of the most important leadership skills is giving constructive feedback. Many people avoid difficult conversations because they fear hurting someone's feelings. Others become overly critical, believing harshness produces better results. Neither approach is effective. Great leaders focus on improvement, not blame. Instead of saying, "You handled that poorly," they might say, "Let's look at what happened and discuss how we can improve next time." The conversation shifts from criticism to growth. People become more willing to accept feedback because they feel respected rather than attacked. Recognition is equally important. People naturally want to know that their efforts matter. A sincere compliment costs nothing, yet it can dramatically improve motivation and confidence. Simple statements such as, "You did an excellent job preparing for this meeting," or "I appreciate the effort you put into solving that problem," remind people that their contributions are noticed. Leaders who celebrate progress inspire people to continue growing. Conflict is another test of leadership communication. Whenever people work together, disagreements are inevitable. Different experiences lead to different opinions, and those differences can either strengthen a team or divide it. Imagine two co-workers arguing over the best way to complete an important project. One believes speed is the priority, while the other insists quality should come first. An average manager might immediately choose one side. An exceptional leader pauses, listens carefully, and says, "Both of you want this project to succeed. Let's find a solution that protects quality while keeping us on schedule." Instead of creating winners and losers, the leader creates collaboration. Exceptional leaders also communicate honestly during difficult times. Whether facing organizational change, financial challenges, or unexpected setbacks, people appreciate honesty more than false reassurance. When leaders avoid communication, uncertainty grows. Rumors spread. Confidence falls, and trust begins to disappear. Transparency creates stability. A leader doesn't need to have every answer. It's perfectly acceptable to say, "Here's what we know today, here's what we're still learning, and here's how we'll move forward together." Honest communication reduces fear because people know they are being respected. Another hallmark of exceptional leadership is consistency. People should know what to expect from you. If you remain calm during stressful situations, your team will naturally become calmer. If you communicate respectfully, even during disagreements, others are more likely to do the same. Leadership is contagious. People often mirror the attitude and behavior of the person leading them. Delegation is another area where communication makes all the difference. Assigning tasks is easy. Communicating purpose is leadership. Instead of simply saying, "Finish this report by Friday," explain why it matters. This report will help us make an important decision next week, so accuracy is essential. Let me know if you need any support. When people understand the purpose behind their work, they become more engaged because they see how their contribution fits into the larger mission. Questions are another powerful leadership tool. Exceptional leaders don't assume they always have the best answers. Instead, they ask thoughtful questions that encourage participation. What challenges are you facing? What would you do differently? Is there an idea we haven't considered? Questions like these invite collaboration instead of obedience. They show people that their opinions matter, and people who feel valued are more committed to the success of the team. One of the greatest tests of leadership comes when delivering difficult news, whether it's declining a proposal, changing priorities, or making an unpopular decision. Exceptional leaders communicate with both honesty and empathy. They explain the reasoning behind the decision, acknowledge its impact, and focus on the path forward. They don't avoid difficult conversations, but they also don't forget that every decision affects real people. Perhaps the most powerful leadership principle is leading by example. Your actions give meaning to your words. If you encourage accountability, be accountable yourself. If you expect honesty, speak honesty. If you want people to remain calm under pressure, demonstrate that same composure when challenges arise. People pay far more attention to what you consistently do than to what you occasionally say. Trust is built one conversation at a time. Every promise you keep, every respectful disagreement, every encouraging word, and every thoughtful decision adds another layer to your credibility. Over time, people stop following you because they have to. They follow because they want to. That is the highest form of leadership. As you continue your journey, remember that exceptional communication is not about having perfect words. It is about making people feel respected, understood, and inspired. When your words consistently create clarity instead of confusion, hope instead of fear, and cooperation instead of conflict, you become more than a skilled communicator. You become the kind of leader people trust during uncertainty, respect during disagreement, and remember long after the conversation ends. And in the end, that is what exceptional leadership is all about. Chapter 12. Becoming the person people want to listen to. Every journey eventually reaches a destination, but the destination is never truly the end. It is the beginning of a new way of thinking, acting, and living. Throughout this audiobook, you've learned that articulate communication is not about using impressive words or delivering perfect speeches. It is about thinking clearly, speaking with confidence, listening with intention, and leading with integrity. Now the question becomes, what do you do with everything you've learned? The answer is simple. You practice it. Because communication is not a talent you possess. It is a habit you build. The people we admire most did not become remarkable communicators overnight. They became remarkable because they treated every conversation as an opportunity to improve. They learned from their mistakes, welcomed feedback, and never assumed they had mastered the skill. The same opportunity is available to you. Every day, you speak with family members, co-workers, friends, customers, or strangers. Most of these conversations seem ordinary, but they are quietly shaping your reputation. People are deciding whether you are trustworthy, thoughtful, calm, and dependable. They are deciding whether your words carry weight. That is why there are no unimportant conversations. Each interaction is another chance to become the kind of person people naturally respect. One of the greatest qualities you can develop is authenticity. Many people spend too much time trying to sound like successful leaders instead of becoming one. They copy someone else's vocabulary, tone, or speaking style, hoping it will make them appear more confident. But people are drawn to authenticity, not imitation. The goal has never been to become the loudest voice in the room. The goal is to become the clearest. When your words reflect your genuine values, people sense your sincerity. They trust you because they know they are hearing the real person, not someone performing for approval. Another quality shared by respected communicators is consistency. Trust is built through repeated experiences, not isolated moments. If you remain respectful during disagreements, people notice. If you keep your promises, people remember. If your actions consistently match your words, your credibility grows stronger with every conversation. Leadership is earned through consistency long before it is recognized with a title. Humility is equally important. One of the biggest misconceptions about leadership is that leaders must always have the right answer. In reality, exceptional leaders are comfortable admitting when they don't know something. They ask questions, they seek advice. They remain curious because they understand that learning never ends. The moment you believe there is nothing left to learn is the moment your growth begins to slow. Instead, approach every conversation with curiosity. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this person? You will be surprised how often wisdom appears in unexpected places. Another lifelong habit is reflection. At the end of each day, spend a few moments reviewing your conversations. Did you listen carefully? Did you interrupt unnecessarily? Were your ideas clear? Did your words encourage or discourage someone? Reflection transforms experience into improvement. Without reflection, we repeat the same habits. With reflection, every conversation becomes a lesson. Remember that confidence grows through action. There will still be moments when you feel nervous before a presentation. There will still be conversations that don't go exactly as planned. You may occasionally forget a point or struggle to express an idea. That's perfectly normal. Growth does not require perfection. It requires persistence. Every successful communicator has experienced awkward moments, difficult meetings, and disappointing performances. What separates them from everyone else is that they kept practicing. They understood that confidence is built one conversation at a time. Another important lesson is to focus on serving rather than impressing. Whenever you enter a conversation, ask yourself, how can I help this person? Maybe you can offer encouragement. Maybe you can provide clarity. Maybe you can simply listen. When your attention shifts from protecting your image to serving others, communication becomes more natural. Your nervousness decreases because the conversation is no longer about proving yourself. It becomes about creating value. This simple mindset changes everything. Never underestimate the power of small improvements. Replacing one filler word with a thoughtful pause. Listening a little longer before responding. Explaining one idea more clearly than yesterday. Making eye contact with confidence. These actions may seem insignificant, but over months and years they create extraordinary change. Success is rarely built through dramatic transformations. It is built through small habits repeated consistently. As you continue your journey, remember that leadership is not reserved for executives, politicians, or business owners. You lead every time your words bring calm to a difficult situation. You lead every time you encourage someone who doubts themselves. You lead every time you resolve conflict with patience instead of anger. You lead every time you help another person understand something more clearly. Leadership begins wherever your influence begins, and your influence begins with your communication. One day, people may not remember the exact advice you gave or the specific stories you shared, but they will remember how you made them feel. They will remember that you listened without interrupting. They will remember that you remained calm when everyone else became emotional. They will remember that you spoke with honesty instead of ego, clarity instead of confusion, and confidence instead of arrogance. That is the kind of communicator people seek out. That is the kind of leader people trust. As this audiobook comes to an end, remember that your voice is one of your greatest assets. It has the power to strengthen relationships, create opportunities, inspire confidence, and guide others through uncertainty. Use it wisely, speak with clarity, think with purpose, listen with empathy, lead with integrity, and never stop improving. Because the moment people believe your words, trust your character, and feel inspired by your example, you will have achieved something far greater than becoming an articulate speaker. You will have become the person people genuinely want to listen to. Congratulations! By reaching the end of this audiobook, you've taken an important step toward becoming a more articulate communicator and a more effective leader. But remember, knowledge alone doesn't change lives. Action does. The true value of these lessons will not be measured by how much you remember today. It will be measured by how you communicate tomorrow. Every conversation is an opportunity to practice. Every meeting is a chance to become clearer. Every difficult question is an invitation to think calmly. Every disagreement is an opportunity to lead with respect instead of emotion. You don't need a perfect vocabulary to earn respect. You don't need a powerful title to influence people, and you don't need to be fearless to speak with confidence. You simply need the willingness to think before you speak, listen before you respond, and communicate with honesty, clarity, and purpose. There will be moments when you stumble over your words or wish you had said something differently. Don't let those moments discourage you. Every great communicator has walked that same path. Progress is built one conversation at a time. As you move forward, remember that leadership begins long before people call you a leader. It begins the moment your words encourage someone, solve a problem, calm uncertainty, or inspire action. That's the kind of influence that leaves a lasting impact. So keep learning, keep listening, keep practicing. Speak clearly when others create confusion. Think calmly when others react emotionally. Lead confidently when others hesitate. Because your voice is more than a way to express ideas, it is one of the most powerful tools you have to build trust, create opportunities, and make a meaningful difference in the lives of others. Thank you for listening, and I wish you every success on your journey to becoming someone people genuinely want to hear and confidently choose to follow.